Hey, it's Jason ODB, the Lincoln Addict. I want to hit you guys with another video. This one's Bring a Trailer. And you will notice that this 67 Lincoln Continental did sell. So you see here where it says sold for $78,500. Although I wanted to do this review of this listing prior to it ending, it just didn't work out. And I decided I still wanted to go back to kind of showcase why this car sold for nearly 80 grand. So a couple things to start with. In 67, there were 2,276 convertibles built. So it's kind of a rare bird. 11,060 coupes. And then sedans, of course, were super popular, 32,331. Now, the original price of this car back in the day was $6,449. Of course, that's pretty much the base price. There were a few options you could add, and this car actually has a couple. Typically, what I've seen is the 66 and 67 Lincoln Continentals maybe won't sell for as much, only because it does seem like the 1s through the 5s are more sought after. However, I'm seeing a shift in that because people just want a convertible. They love these cars, and 66 and 67 convertibles and just the car in general, they're awesome. They had worked out some bugs. Of course, there was the redesign. So, this body style started in 66, but by all accounts, I've been a big fan of these cars. I had a 67 sedan, and they're just a lot of fun, and let's jump in here. So you see the 67 Continental convertible, of course, built at Wixom. They all were in Michigan. Based upon the VIN plate, they break this down. This is why I love Bring a Trailer. August 19th, 66. It was acquired in New Hampshire by the current owner in 2012, so they've had it for 10 years. Refurbishment work completed in 2015, included the exterior, overhauling the convertible top system, and you're going to see so much more, including the transmission and engine, which is something you don't typically see because these engines run really, really well, and they're pretty much a beast, and you typically don't see them rebuilt. It doesn't mean that they're not. The engine in my 64, I went ahead and just had rebuilt since we had it, torn apart so much. Here, it kind of just goes into some of the basic things. The steering box was replaced in 2021. And you'll see that in some of the paperwork. So you see the powder blue, and we can see over here in the main bullet points repainted in powder blue. So we do know that it was a respray / repaint, and you'll see that in some of the photos. But so far, everything's looking great. This says 20,000 miles shown. So, there would be a question like, okay, well, if the engine was rebuilt, it may not even have that many miles. Maybe the odometer stopped originally at 20 grand. But anytime the engine's been rebuilt, typically as long as a reputable person did it, it's pretty much back at 0 miles on the engine. And then, of course, the car itself, we have to normally rely on the odometer. So the powder blue here, so if you're a fan of blue cars, I love this color. Some may not like blue colors, but this is a lighter one, right? So it kind of has that powder blue, of course, look. So to me, it's a real classy look. And here it kind of talks a little bit about some of the other items. And it says the rear glass window was overhauled in May 2021 by Seamless Customs there. So the convertible top and stuff they're talking about. Steel wheels, of course, are on the car, 15-inch, which is standard. The interior looks fantastic. The cabin's trimmed in parchment leather, vinyl with polished trim over contrasting carpet. So, again, one thing they do with Bring a Trailer, my understanding, kind of looking into it further, when you submit your information, they kind of compile all this, and that's part of that listing fee, which I've looked into, and I'll do another video on how it all works, but they do a great job of kind of telling the story of these cars, if you will. It does mention aftermarket stereo, so we'll see that. I think they've done that in a good place in the trunk, and it doesn't really take away from, any of the look in here. It talks about the 120 mile an hour speedometer, the 5-digit odometer we saw earlier, 20,000 miles, approximately 6,000 of which have been added by the current owner. So it would be hard to believe that the car only had 20,000 miles and they rebuilt the engine, that's just would be unnecessary unless something catastrophic happened. It could just be that the original car only had 20,000, or that maybe it had rolled over to 120. And I do believe these years it would just say 20,000, but I'd have to refer back to that. So there's a couple of things there. The 462, for those that don't know, again, 66 through 68 and a half-ish. So basically 2 years plus several months, maybe a half year into 68. The 462 was used. It's a very solid engine. Some people prefer the 460 because there are some aftermarket type things you can do. There are some parts you can get a little bit easier, but there's no challenge definitely with the 462 at all. The steering box was replaced July 2021. I think we saw that above. Looking at this photo, we'll go through the photos in a minute, but this is what you typically want to see underneath a car. Pretty clean, looks very, very factory, and so on. Here you see, something I wouldn't be alarmed over it, but basically when they resprayed, they just didn't tape off the VIN plate, and that is typical. You'll sometimes see it, and this could actually be cleaned up. I'd rather see the VIN plate never removed and just taped up. But, some people might come in here and kind of use some paint thinner and take this back off and put it back to the factory if you wanted to. But, that is the explanation there on why that's painted. So here's some of the breakdown in terms of the date. It did have a DSO at Dallas, Texas. So that tells us that it did spend time in the South. It didn't spend all of its time up in Massachusetts or the Northeast, right? So that's kind of a good thing. There are some videos here showing the top working, showing a short drive. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of see if this will play. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So, but here's the cool thing, right? I expanded this a minute ago, and you'll see right here, there are a ton of photos, and it's fantastic. So I want to just briefly go through these. So that front 3/4 shot looks like you got, really no damage up here. These are big cars. Let's be honest, and you'll typically see dents and dings, and over the course of time, someone was moving it. But it looks really good here. We can see that it has the feature for the convertible. Again, this is a feature 6667, where you could insert the key here and then work the top. It does bypass the switch up here, which is fantastic. So if you did ever have a challenge with the switch up on the dash, you could put the top up or down. This was primarily, I think, what John Cashman said on Jay Leno's Garage, I believe, and he said this before, that was kind of a courtesy if you had ran up to the store, bought some groceries, and you wanted to throw those in the back and not in the back seat. You could insert your key, deck lid comes open, put your items in, turn the key the other way, deck lid closes. So that side shot there, everything we're seeing looks good here. You got your typical. A lot of times the purists, they'll chime in on the post and say they don't like the wide white walls and things. The white wall size, changed kind of throughout the different years. And, this looks kind of like more factory correct. Whether you left it that way or not, that's, something you could do. You could change. I typically have said this in the past. What you want to do is you always want to look in here if you can. These are made out of pot metal in these years. These trim pieces, same with the very front. And we'll jump back here, like these pieces in here, and they will tend to pit really bad. Not everyone redoes pot metal, right? So you have to find a good place that really knows on how to rechrome or redo pot metal. But, I'm not indicating anything on this car looks bad. It looks really good, but I just like to call that out. There is a piece, if I remember correctly, that might be available from Steel Rubber. There's a flap, if you will, that kind of goes in here, and all it serves as a purpose is to kind of visually take your eye away from that gap right there, and that was a factory piece. So that's one piece that could be added, if I remember correctly. And it actually looks like it is here, so I might stand corrected. Actually, yeah, so this is good. You could see here at first, my eye was thinking that this was a gap, but you could see here that that piece is actually there. So good stuff there. Bumpers look fantastic. I mean, I would assume that this car has either been really well taken care of or they did a fantastic detail on it. Everything I'm seeing looks good. I do look to see if there's that ding here. As I mentioned, I had a 67 sedan for a while, and I had a pretty big ding right there, which the assumption was that it jumped into reverse at some point and hit something and caused that dink, or that I've talked about, if you will, in the past in the other videos. If you're new to the channel, check out, subscribe, look at the library of videos. I do believe this these little rivets or sometimes you'll see a screw. I believe from the factory there was an item there. I have seen people come and put additional screws, which looks not that great. But what happens is these clips will break underneath here, and you can buy these clips now. There's people that 3D print and reproduce them. But typically what I'd rather see is something here, as long as it's not, butchered up, to kind of hold that. And we could talk more in the future on that. But if you look, and it's going to jump around. It doesn't like on this site whenever I zoom in when I'm doing the screen recording. But, oftentimes what I'll do is I'll try to look in here and kind of see, does all of this stuff kind of line up? Because these little pieces, once they're all taken off, they are kind of, I don't want to say a pain to put back on, but, you just want to make sure everything was kind of put back. It does look like this is depressed a little bit. But to me, this is a super nice car, and it wouldn't... this is a car I would, if I was looking to buy, I would buy and probably just drive. It's that nice as far as what I can tell here. I'm going through these kind of fast here. You can always go back and look at these on the website. Of course, as I've mentioned, Bring a Trailer. Although I'm not affiliated with them, you can go back and type in Lincoln Continental. It'll show you, of course, the current listings. But then you can look back at the recent sales, and you can kind of go through these. Here we get a closer glimpse here. This all looks really, really good. Contrary to a lot of people's beliefs, these are reflectors. I thought it would be cool to put the taillights up here. But you can kind of see here, this doesn't look like it's lined up perfect again. And you can imagine taking all this trim off and doing a full, repaint and stuff like that. It's a lot of work. And it's hard to kind of tell maybe if they just didn't have things lined up here right. But again, I'm only pointing it out because I don't want to just go, hey, everything looks perfect, and not give you guys any insight into what to look for. There might be a little overlap typically from the factory here. I don't recall that. You can see it does look like there's a little notch, but, again, very minor in the grand scheme of things with this big car. Typically, you'll see in here a lot of folks maybe won't come and polish all this. This looks really, really good and shiny. So that's a good thing. I'll point out the sedans, they had, I think it was on all of the sedans, they had the logo here that kind of spun open, and you'd put the key lock in here. Of course, that is not what you're going to see in a convertible. You just have the Lincoln Star, and that's because, you're not opening the deck lid with a key, right? You're using the key switch in the side rear quarter panel, or typically on the dash is where you're going to use that. Bumpers look great. All of this trim looks really, really good. Inside here, a lot of times you'll see pitting. This is made out of pot metal as well, and this is one of the nicer grills I've ever seen. You typically will see some pitting, and maybe there's a little bit if you're looking in person, but to me, this is a fantastic grill. Tires do look good. I've always mentioned, depending on what your budget is, if you're buying a car, try to find out what the date is on the tires. A lot of times if the cars aren't driven that much, or you might get a car and you want to make sure it's safe, you may end up changing the tires right away, and that's a cost on top of. You got your seat switch there. The rear seat belts, these do not look factory, which again, I'd rather have something. The buckles are a little bit different in 66, 67. But again, that's being very nitpicky. I wouldn't be concerned with that if I was, just looking to get a car and enjoy it with my family. I'd rather have the safety with the seat belts 100%. Again, everything we're seeing looks really, really good. It did appear that they had said earlier that the seats maybe were redone. The trim they talked about with the top and stuff. The seats look really, really good. I mean, I like when the seats have this kind of look to them. I mean, to me, this almost looks factory. So, if that wasn't super clear, you could always ask those clarifying questions. But I love this. And then you've got the power headrest I've talked a little bit about in the past. This is the passenger side, and this little piece here does tend to break off the knob that we saw on the other side. Just to be clear, I forget if someone's making replacements, but this little plastic piece underneath here will tend to break. And I do believe here, from what I'm seeing, I'm going from memory, that this is something someone put on over time. I don't think this is factory. I do believe that there always is the adjustable item here, but somebody could chime in if I've got that incorrect. Here you do see the spree control. The dash looks fantastic. It is possible this dash was redone. I don't see the speaker grill here, and if you've watched any of these, you know that I've talked about like they will crack around there. And then looking in here, I would assume that this was maybe redone at some point, but regardless, I'd rather see the work done and the car look very nice and presentable. Here's your up-down top switch. Here's your hood pull latch. There's the speed control, which is pretty rare. You don't see it very often, especially in these years. Here's the odometer. So again, my assumption is that it did roll over. It was probably 120,000 mile car, and then if it was rebuilt and they put 6,000 miles on it, I think the current owner, or maybe since the rebuild, that told us that it just had over 100,000 miles before it was rebuilt. And again, typically I would tell people you don't have to rebuild these engines unless something catastrophic, as I mentioned earlier, has happened. Just a lot of detail photos. This stuff is all pot metal, so you will tend to see what you're seeing right here. You can get in here with some Brasso and polish all this and kind of clean it, and I enjoy doing that kind of stuff. But all of this stuff here that you're going to see, that's typical in these years and some of the other Lincoln years as well. So I'm going to hit escape, which I like to do, and jump back and just take a look. I do like to look at the foot pedal for the throttle. It kind of tells a story. I've seen some cars where this has been changed, and that would be fine. But this is original car, of course, for the most part, and it tells a little bit of a story. A lot of people, the way they rest their foot on the pedal, you can kind of see a lot of wear down here and things like that. But this looks typical for what they're saying for the mileage. Top looks fantastic. You can see how clean all this stuff is. My assumption is that they came in here at some point and, painted all of this and took the time. John Cashman on Jay Leno's Garage talked about 66, 67. Unique feature is the back is glass, which is very cool. And this is kind of above and beyond the normal, 61 through 65 convertible. This kind of adds another piece of complexity. Opens the same way for the most part, but the back glass is pretty cool. Some people have asked, hey, can I do something like that in my earlier year Lincoln? And it would be a lot of work to be able to try to make something like that happen. In the earlier year Lincolns, just to be clear, they were like the vinyl back windows. In here, I always look to see, how bad or good is all of this. You can see there's a little bit of surface rust. This is typical. This is like really nice stuff here, okay? But you will sometimes see a little bit of this, which is not a bad thing. The pump is up here in these years for the convertible top, and you can kind of see in here, this is the way it looked originally. You could go in and detail all this if you wanted to. But it's good that they're showing us all the photos. You can see in here, your typical little scratches and stuff from adjusting this. That's just when they went in. They blew all this in with paint, which is good. And it's all sealed up. We can see here it does have the upgraded upper back panel switch. So it's got the billet housing, which is billet aluminum. And you've got what appears to be the upgraded, items either from John Cashman, he's since retired, or John Brewer. So, this is going to hopefully give you many years of carefree issues in terms of the upper back panel switch. Trunk looks great in terms of, the carpeting and stuff. This isn't factory, which is fine. We'll talk about the stereo here in a second. They're going to start showing photos. It's all aftermarket stuff. You could easily take it out if you don't like it. It does have the pads. So people have asked in the past, this pad and this pad here, is that factory? Absolutely. These are factory. They're typically missing if the car's been taken apart. People forget to put them back in or lose the long screws, but those are factory. The stereo itself, you may not like it, you may not like the look. This stuff is easy to take out. Just like if you buy a house and you don't like the wall colors, just repaint it, right? With this, I would tell you that, if it sounds good and you got the top down, family's in the car and you like it, leave it. If for whatever reason you're looking to kind of display the trunk area at a show, you could always have a local stereo shop come in here, take this out, put something more inconspicuous in if you want it. It does have the bar, which is a factory item, 66, 67. That was an engineering fix from Ford, Lincoln, if you will. And I'm working on a video now to talk about why in 64 and 65 you have to install that sort or that kind of bar in your car. You really should. You see the original lines here, right? So what I would point out is if you look at the usual suspects, convertiblelincolns.com or some of the other sources, if you will, you'll see that to get a full upgraded kit for the top, it does add up. So this top may work totally fine, right? We saw some of the upgrades that were done. I would say at some point you're going to have to come in here and change all these lines, right? And these fittings and things like that. You can buy an entire kit. You might buy this car or this gentleman that bought it and have carefree issues for 5-10 years. I just like to point out that this wasn't all redone, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you can imagine these cars are getting older, and it's something to call out. Closer look at all the stereo. Again, probably done, 10, 15 years ago. Not necessarily a bad thing, just, doesn't really flow in the trunk. Here, we do see that it has the factory 3-port. You will oftentimes see someone add in an additional fuel filter that's coming in. You always have the factory fuel filter here. This is totally fine. It's not, of course, totally factory, but this is a good thing to me. It's allowing the fuel to be filtered even before it comes in and then when it comes out to the carb. We do see the master cylinder's been upgraded. I know sometimes that can be a pain if there is speed control on the car, and it does look like they've changed one of the relays here to like this typical newer style 5-prong relay, which just something to call out. For sake of not making these videos too super long, everything under the engine looks good. Engine bay, underneath the car, this is the way, to me, you want to see a car of this age look. I scanned through the photos, and all this texturing and stuff here is all from the factory. This is the main kind of quote, frame rail for the unibody. It looks really good. All the stuff that you're seeing here is typically what you want to see. It does look like the drive shaft was redone. It's painted. It was probably balanced. They come in here and they put all new items. So it looks good. And then lastly, there's a ton of paperwork and collateral and literature. Here you can see this reinforces to us like this wasn't just a quick respray. And when you go through the paperwork on here, this is really what helped us sell the car for almost $80,000. You basically have a super clean car. We looked at all of the photos, a really nice car, and tons of paperwork. If you look at some of the, here, $1,800, $10,520, $17,677, and this might have been, you'd have to kind of compare to see if that 10,000 was a part of this 17,660 or 677, but rag joint reassembly with steering column, so on and so forth. The main thing I wanted to reinforce here is like when you look at all of these photos, you see, or all these receipts, you see like how much money can go in one of these cars, right? Now, not every car is going to require all this, but I'm telling you, a car that sells for 80 grand and it has the paperwork to back it up, it reinforces like, look, engine rebuild, 8 grand, transmission rebuild, 2 grand, which is probably cheap by today's standards. Because keep in mind, this receipt was from 7 years ago. Now, of course, this is a C6 transmission, a little bit more cost effective than the earlier Lincolns, but rear end rebuild, which it did look like it had been rebuilt based upon the hardware I was seeing, $1,500. I mean, they literally redid pretty much everything on this car. You can see here, engine removed, training and rear end, $65, 28 hours, so on and so forth. So here you can see repair framework is needed, drill tap bolts, I don't know, all kinds of different things they charged for, different line items. But it was funny, they put this in here. I think this was from Green Acres. I think it was supposed to just maybe be like, hey, yeah, here's a famous Lincoln in a TV show. But that's it. I mean, it's a super nice car. That's why it went for almost 80 grand. And if you go down here and you want to see some cool entertainment, sometimes you can go read all of these comments and you can see how the bids jumped up from 56 to 57 to 65 to 70. You'll have people in here talking about, go to so-and-so. You'll often see John Cashman's name mentioned. A lot of people love to discuss these cars, and that's one reason why I've been doing these videos. Leave a comment if you can. Subscribe, like, and thank you guys for all the support. Stay on the rise and have a great weekend. ODB, the Lincoln Addict, we out of here.